How's it going, everyone? Welcome to a Feral Druid rotation guide and talent guide, if you could say that, where we're going to take a look at the Feral Druid and the different types of talents you're going to choose and what kind of rotation you can use in order to get good single target damage. So hopefully this guide should sort of help you out if you have a little bit of issues when it comes to your damage as a Feral Druid. Now, there has been some talk about Feral Druid being really bad at the beginning of BFA, but just know that by now it should pretty much be balanced out. So your single target damage should have no issues when it comes to Feral Druid. Now, as you can see, I'm inside where we have a target dummy, and what I'm just going to do is I'm going to go ahead and go through the different talents that I chose in order to do good single target damage when it comes to players and raids and that sort of thing. So let's just go ahead and take a look at what we have here. Inside my talent tree, you can see we have many different talents chosen already. And I just want to sort of explain why I chose these different talents, because there's a reason between, choosing different sets of talents and what kind of builds you're using. So I just want to make an argument here for why I'm choosing these specific talents here. Now, when it comes to single target, in the first row here, there's only really one I think that is really good, which is Sabertooth. Now, a lot of people do also use Lunar Inspiration, which is something that is good to use to apply pressure to a few more enemies if you have more than just one enemy in front of you, or if you're the type of person who likes to kite the enemy a lot, then Lunar Inspiration can be something to use here as well. Now, I did personally find that Sabertooth does a lot more damage when it comes to a single target. So if you're the type of person who likes to be aggressive and up close to the opponent, then Sabertooth is going to do a lot more damage than Lunar Inspiration. I would say you need to sort of decide between, do you want to have high damage or do you want to have a more convenient spell to use? And in my case, I just think that Sabertooth is a lot better. Another thing you need to think about here is that when you choose Sabertooth, and this is a really important point to make, when you choose Sabertooth, it will automatically increase the duration of rip on your target per combo point spent. This means that when you start a fight, you need to apply the bleeds first, because that's what a Feral Druid does. We apply bleeds, then we build up combo points, and then we spend the combo points. It's very simple. Then once the bleeds they run out, we just reapply the bleeds. When we apply the bleeds, we have two bleeds with this build here. We have our Rake, and we also have Rip. When you apply Rake, and then you apply Rip, you will not need to think about Rip again, because every single time you're going to be using Ferocious Bite, it refreshes your Rip. So you don't need to think about this one anymore. This means that right now, with this build here, you essentially only have one bleed that you need to be constantly aware of when it comes to your opponent. Of course, you could also argue that you could use Thrash and keep that up on your opponent at all times if you want to. But in general, you need to have Rake up on your opponent at all times when it comes to this build here. So that's the one you need to focus on, whereas the Rip just gets refreshed. So that's my argument for why I should choose Sabertooth and not Lunar Inspiration, because with Lunar Inspiration, you have Rake, you have Rip, and you also have your Moonfire ability that you need to maintain on your opponent. That's 3 different dots you need to maintain at all times. I think that's too much, and I see the convenience in having this for a ranged weapon you can throw from Feral, but I just found that I don't use it often enough to argue for why I should choose Lunar Inspiration instead. Again, it depends on how you want to do PvP or single target damage. I just think that it's not good enough for that. If you want to do raid boss fights and that sort of thing, Sabertooth will be a lot better. Next row, Wild Charge, is the one that I usually choose here, because I like to kite their opponent, which you would need to do as a Feral Druid, because if you go toe-to-toe against somebody who is a much heavier class than you, let's say a Paladin or a Death Knight or Warrior, then you will lose, unless there's a high difference in gear between you. So make sure you have a way to get to your opponent fast enough. Some people like to choose Tiger Dash, which actually replaces your dash that's down here, which has a 2-minute cooldown, but lasts for 10 seconds. Tiger Dash replaces that with a 45% second cooldown, but it does also decrease the time by down to 5 seconds. So this one, it replaces one ability, whereas this one gives you one ability. And I think that's better, personally. The next one down here is between what kind of defensives you want to use, or if you want to have extra range in your attacks. A lot of people like to choose Balance Affinity because it increases all your attacks by 3 yards. This is really good for when you do dungeons and that sort of thing. You have a lot of different mobs that you need to apply bleeds to and that sort of thing. So I say that sort of thing a lot. I'm going to try not to do that. So if you want to go up against and sort of AoE build, then Balance Affinity is going to be the best thing to do here. Whereas in PvP or single target builds, I would probably go one of these two. A lot of people choose Guardian Affinity because it reduces all damage taken by 6%, and you also learn 2 more tank-related abilities. But I found that these are not as good when it comes to giving you an instant heal. If you rooted your target and you kite away from them, this one is just not going to heal you up fast enough. And this one over here will actually do that, which is the Restoration Affinity. So this is an option. It depends on your playstyle, but I like to go with Restoration Affinity. Down here, we also have a couple of different things. For PvP specific builds, I would say Mighty Bash is the best one. For raids, you might want to choose something else like Typhoon or Mass Entanglement, something that will actually help out your raid group, because against boss fights, Mighty Bash is not going to work. But for PvP, this is definitely the one that I prefer to use because it's very good to have in many different situations. The next one down here, a lot of people tell you to choose Soul of the Forest. I'm actually going to switch that over to Incarnation right now, because Soul of the Forest is going to give you back energy that you spent on a finisher. And what this is all about is that it goes very well together with Sabertooth. So you might be asking, why don't I choose this talent right now? Well, I have been experimenting a lot with these 2 different ones. Like, a lot of guides tell you to choose either Soul of the Forest or Incarnation. Incarnation is a very important cooldown for many different reasons. And again, I want you to put yourself in a situation here where you are fighting many different opponents at one time. Let's say you have 2 other people that are allies with you, 2 other players, going up against 2 other players or 3 other players. Then because you need to fight so many different opponents at the same time and apply pressure and that sort of thing, I just said it again, Soul of the Forest might be the best thing for you because it is constantly being used and it's passive, so you don't need to think about it. But if you go up against somebody in a 1 versus 1 scenario, then this is a really good burst to have ready. And I know it has a 3-minute cooldown, which is kind of, because Feral Druids has very few cooldowns that last more than 30 seconds. Tiger's Fury is actually the longest one we have when we don't count this one. So this one does replace your Berserk, which does kind of the same, but not really, because Shred and Rake will have a much more increased effect when it comes to damage. And you can also jump into stealth if things get out of hand. So a really good bursty technique or talent to choose in PvP situations. So I'm going to switch over to this one because that's the one I prefer to use here. I don't feel a lot of difference because this one gives you back energy, right? I don't feel a lot of difference when it comes to the amount of energy starved you might get. It does also give you a firm 5% increased damage on your finishing moves, which is also worth considering. So again, like I said, it's about, do you want to have a sustained damage on multiple opponents, or do you want to have a very bursty technique with a 3-minute cooldown? So you need to sort of figure out what you want to do here. On the next 2 rows, or at least the next row, we have Scent of Blood, Brutal Slash, and Primal Wrath. Brutal Slash is a very good single target technique. These other 2 are more focused against multiple targets. So if you want to build on a AoE build, then these 2 are good. But for single target, Brutal Slash is just what I found to be the best one. And it's also the one recommended in every single guide you see online. Unless, you're asking people who don't like Brutal Slash because it replaces a technique called Swipe. So this is one option here when it comes to single target. On the next one, we need to ask ourselves, do we like to use Blood Talents? Now, if you didn't realize, when you have Blood Talents selected here and you use Regrowth on yourself, you get a buff that you can use on your next 2 melee attacks, which increases your attacks by 25% for the full duration. This is very important to note, that we get for the full duration, Because if I were to go up now and apply, let's just build some combo points. If I were to apply Rip right now, then we have 25% increased damage for Rip. If I were to build up some combo points and then use our Ferocious Bite, it refreshes Rip. And that 25% is maintained on our Rip. That's very important to point out here. So Blood Talons is a massive, I would say, a massive increase in damage overall on your rotation. However, a lot of people don't like the thought that they need to heal themselves in order to buff their attacks. Now, we do have a passive that we get as a Feral Druid when we reach about level 80, I do believe, that if we were to go ahead and build up combo points, let me just show you. So now I have 5 combo points, which gives me a 100% chance when I use a finisher to get this little ability here called Predatory Swiftness. It makes your next healing, or regrowth we call it, or Entangling Roots free to cast in cat form. And now I have Blood Talons again. So this is something you need to keep in mind during your rotations. When do you have this buff here that you can use in order to get Blood Talons? And you need to make sure you use it right before a finisher or any kind of attacks that deals a lot of damage. So I would usually say, use your regrowth to get Blood Talons right before Rake or right before Ferocious Bite. Or Rip if that one actually ran out because you couldn't maintain it using Ferocious Bite, then that's an option too. So these are the ones you want to keep an eye out for when it comes to using your Blood Talons. So these are my builds here and sort of my explanation for why you want to choose the different ones. When it comes to PvP talents, now I know adaptation is not recommended for PvP, but I don't like having to keep an eye out for when I want to get myself out of stuns. I know it's better to use Gladiator's Medallion. I just think that adaptation is much nicer because you don't have to think about it. So I use adaptation. It is recommended to use Gladiator's Medallion because it gives you control. When it comes to the other PvP talents, Thorns is a really good PvP talent to have. Or if you fight enemies out in the wild, then this one will actually damage their opponent back when they attack you. And it will also decrease their movement speed by 50% for 4 seconds. So if you're about to run into or if you're already fighting a player that you can tell, okay, he's about to do something really nasty. Maybe you just opened up on your opponent and you stunned him and everything, and now he's getting back out of it, and you can tell, okay, he's not to get really bursty on me. Then using Thorns in combination with Survival Instincts, which decreases your damage taken by 50% for 6 seconds, is a huge benefit when it comes to survival. So Thorns, definitely something I recommend using. Some people use it in macro in order to use Thorns and Survival Instincts at the same time, or at least right after each other. I just sort of have them in the same place. So if I click my, what do you call it, 10 key on my mouse, because I have an MMO mouse, then I will be using Survival Instinct. Then if I hold down Shift and click the same key, then it's going to switch over and use Thorns. So I sort of have a shortcut for that one there. The next one is Ferocious Wound. This one is, I wouldn't say mandatory, but it will be very good for you to use. Again, this one is very good to use in combination with this build here that does not use Lunar Inspiration. Because when you have 5 combo points you spent on your Ferocious Bite, it will go ahead and decrease the opponent's health by 8% for 30 seconds. And this stacks twice, which means 16%. This is a really powerful health reducing technique, so I recommend having this. Plus it's a passive, so you don't have to maintain it as much. You just need to make sure you have 5 combo points when you attack your opponent, which shouldn't be that difficult. The next one down here, a lot of people, they recommend Cyclone. I have it here because it is nice to have. It essentially only costs mana. It doesn't cost energy, which is nice. And it sort of traps their opponents in a state kind of similar to Entangling Roots, which is the one we use to root our opponents. But the difference is here that you can't attack your opponent. Like, they're immune to attacks, but they also can't attack you back. Whereas Entangling Roots, you can still hit them and then they actually get thrown out of Entangling Roots, at least there's a chance for it. And they can also attack you back. So for ranged dealers or healers on their opponent's team, Cyclone is the better option here. rather than, entangling roots. So that's something to consider there. There is some other different talents here that you could consider. Malone's Swiftness is just mainly for convenience. I use that sometimes. And you can also, Freedom of the Herd is more of if you're a team player. So again, I'm focusing on single target here and just you versus one other opponent. So there is some other ones here that are good for multiple targets or together with other people. So Heart of the Wild is also recommended in a lot of cases because it sort of buffs your bear form and your cast form. But I'm building on a build here that uses Restoration Affinity and not Guardian Affinity. So even though I will be using bear form when I fight, because it's essential for a feral to do that when you take a lot of damage, this one is, built for people who actually uses Guardian Affinity. At least I think it is. So those are the talents. And I hope that my explanation was sort of understandable and you could sort of see why I chose these talents. Again, you might have a really good argument for why I should not choose certain talents, but these are what other guides helped me figure out, and this is what I, by my own experiments, found out is the best to use. So when it comes to rotation, there's a very specific way to do it with Feral Druid. Feral Druid is one of the more... It has a higher learning curve than a lot of classes. Some people say it's very easy to play, to play a feral, and you shouldn't spend too much time before you know your rotation and that sort of thing. But it is one of the more difficult classes, no matter what people say, or specializations. So just to kind of give you an idea about what the basic rotation is here, do note that because RIP gets refreshed when we use Ferocious Bite, even though RIP says that, the more combo points you spend on it, it is going to increase its duration. It doesn't increase in damage. It only increases duration. So we only need to have just about 1 or 2 combo points when we spend RIP. That's very important to point out because when we open up, we want to apply the bleeds first, and then we just go over to build up combo points and then spending it on Ferocious Bite, which then refreshes RIP automatically. So we don't need to have this for a long duration because we don't even get to 20 seconds before we actually use Ferocious Bite. So again, with this talent build, I'm going to start every single fight that I possibly can, healing myself. This feels weird to a lot of people to heal yourself before a fight, but if you can, go ahead and do it. If you can't, then that's okay as well. But at least try to do every single start of your fight with a stealth, because stealth is going to buff your Rake by 100%, and it's also going to stun your target. That's a massive buff. It's very important you start from stealth if you can. So this is going to give you 100% increased damage on your Rake. And because you have Blood Talons, you're going to have an increase by an additional 25% damage. So that's 125% damage on your Rake. That's a lot of increase. So make sure you use Regrowth and then use Stealth afterwards in order to get those 100% increased damage and the stun. Then you're going to go up to your target. You're going to use Rake. Then afterwards, we're going to use Tiger's Fury. And you might be asking why. Because Tiger's Fury is an attack that has only a 30-second cooldown, and it increases your damage by 15% for the full duration. Again, a very important keyword there, for the full duration. So just like with the Blood Talons, when we use RIP, and we keep refreshing it using Ferocious Bite, it is going to have not only those 25% increased damage from Blood Talons, but also 15% from Tiger's Fury. This means that we have 40% in increased damage on our RIP once we do actually start using it. So again, Regrowth, Stealth, go up to your opponent, Rake, Tiger's Fury, and RIP. That's all you need to do here to start with. Okay, Rake, Tiger's Fury, RIP. Once you have that, start building up combo points. And then start spending them on Ferocious Bite once you do actually have 5. So let's go ahead and do this a little bit faster. And just need to kind of wait till Tiger's Fury is up again. But you kind of get the idea here. Now, I just want to mention, this might seem difficult for a lot of people because there's a lot of different, then you have to click this spell, and then this spell, and then this spell. And it's a very specific order. I have a macro down here, which just has one button that I just keep spamming in order to do this combination here. So I'll show you that one right after we get through the rotation, okay? So again, Regrowth, Stealth, Rake, Tiger's Fury, Rip, then start building up combo points with Brutal Slash. And then you can see, oh, I don't have any more Brutal Slash, I'm gonna spend a Shred and Ferocious Bite, because I had 5 combo points. Then I just do it again. Build up combo points, again and again and again. And as you can see, we ran out of our Rake, so I'm just gonna use my Blood Talents, Rake, Ferocious Bite, because these two are finishers, so that's what I want to spend my Blood Talents on. Always keep an eye out for how many combo points you have and when Rake is about to run out, because in some cases, you might want to Ferocious Bite first, then Rake. Let's just do it here, there we go. Then you build up again. And in this case here, I'm way ahead of Rake. It's not even halfway done, so I'm just gonna go and use Ferocious Bite and maybe a regular attack like Brutal Slash, because it's not done yet at all. So I'm just gonna keep attacking here. Attack, attack, attack. And because I'm talking, it will take a little bit longer. Rake, then Ferocious Bite. And notice I keep using my free healing spell every single time I'm just about to throw off a finisher. So I'm not using it yet, even though it's tempting while it's sitting there to use it. Gonna use it now. Finisher, finisher. Build up again. And Rip is constantly getting refreshed, so I don't need to worry about it. So I'm just gonna keep attacking. Again, again. Now I use my finishers with Blood Talents. And again. And again. Now do notice this whole time we actually have an additional Tiger's Fury. That's because it only has a 30 seconds cooldown. Will actually be ready for us pretty fast. Whoops, I just used it ahead of me there, so I'm just gonna get back in. But finisher, finisher. You kind of get the idea here. You just build up, and then you spend, and then you keep refreshing. So bear in mind, that was without using Incarnation King of the Jungle, or Berserk, as it's called if you don't talent into Incarnation. If you don't have Incarnation, just use Berserk instead. This is a really easy rotation, I think. A lot of people have issues when it comes to doing with the regrowth at the start of each fight and during your fight. They find it very awkward and weird. I did that myself when I started out playing Feral Druid, but after a while it sort of gets natural, so you don't worry too much about it. You just sort of do it on automatic. So it's not hard once you actually get it into your fingertips. So let's go and talk about this combo macro that I have down here, because let's actually go and use it just so you can see. Bear in mind that the beginning of my fight here is entirely with one button. I don't click any of the other spells, just one button. So I'll just do that combination, and it's gonna lead up till right before when I have to start using my, build up combo points and then spend combo points. That's when it stops, okay? Gonna walk up and just spam one button here. There we go. And that's my macro. And then I just build up combo points with my regular attacks, spend it, build up combo points again with my regular attacks. There we go. Use Blood Talents. Whoops. Let's actually go and get back into cat form. Attack, attack. So the macro is very, very good to have here as an opener. So how does it look like? Well, if I were to go inside my macros, again, if you've never done macros before, you can find it inside your game menu. Go down to macros. I'm just gonna go and use it on my general specific macros for this specific character. In here, you can actually see I have it right here. It's called Opener. The way you do this is by clicking New. Then you choose an icon for your macro, because you need to have a spell icon when you drag it down there. And you also write the name for it. So I could call this one Opener 1 or just Opener or whatever up here in the text field. Just gonna cancel this. And once you have that, just go ahead and write this line here. I'm gonna include that into my the description of this video. Just basically what it does is that it says this is a cast sequence with the slash cast sequence, meaning that each time you click the button, it is going to cast the next spell that is written here. So we have a cast sequence that has a reset for 1 second, meaning that if I were to cast Rake and then wait more than 1 second, then it's going to reset this macro here. So it's going to be Rake again next time I click it. It's a very good thing to have. So the first spell is going to be Rake, Tiger's Fury, Rip, and then I just added a Thrash in there just for, having an extra dot at the beginning of the fight. It is not my experience. Whoops, I actually just did something there. Cancel that. It is not my experience that you will run out of energy that much with this build, because a lot of people get energy start with Feral Druid, And as long as you have a build that is not focused around you needing a lot of energy, then you will have no issues when it comes to energy starvation. So with this specific opener combo here, and you can choose to leave in Thrash or not. Again, it is just this AoE attack here that applies bleeds to everything around you. I think it's a good extra dot to have at the start of the fight. So just go ahead and use this combo here, and just use the attacks in the way that I just showed you, and you'll be absolutely fine. Now you did notice that a few times here I accidentally jumped out of cat form. One thing I recommend doing here is to remove all these different spells when you're in your whatever, you know, human form or whatever you might call it. Go into your spell and drag cat form down to every single slot you have here. Because what this is going to do is, if you accidentally jump out of cat form and you just keep spamming these attacks here, it's going to jump you back into cat form and then continue your attack. So this is a good thing to have here. So I'm in cat form, I start attacking, and then whoops, by accident I jump out. I keep attacking and I jump back in. It's a good idea to have that. So this is basically what I want to show when it comes to the Feral Druid builds. I hope that my guide sort of made sense to you on why I chose the specific talents. Again, there was a couple of talents there that, depending on how you want to play the game, you might choose differently. So there's no, like, this is the right answer sort of thing, but there is a, you know, this is the best answer for certain situations, or for what personal playstyle you might have, because every single person is not the same. You might have a very specific playstyle that involves kiting a lot. In that case, you might choose Lunar Inspiration for your first talent row. If not, then you might choose Sabertooth like I do. So I hope this guide helped you, and I hope to see you in the next video.